Hi everybody, this is Nisbet. I hope you're all doing well and I hope you're ready to create. Today I'm going to show you how to create a watercolor painting of cherry blossoms growing from a cherry blossom tree. Of course, it will be a close-up view like this image. I took this photograph earlier this spring and it's great inspiration for our painting. If you look at the shapes of the blossoms, they are a 5 count. And they've got the center part that is called the anther. They're growing off the branches in different directions. I'm going to keep this this painting pretty simple, but just so you notice, they do take different directions. We're going to explore with that idea, but I'm going to make it easy and simple, especially for those of you who it's your first time painting with watercolor. We're going to create all of the parts and put them together, and then we're going to finish up by creating the background or the blue sky. And I'll show you some watercolor techniques on how to pull paint to create tones of or impressions of clouds. So let's get started with practicing. Okay, so I have this practice piece of paper or this thumbnail sketch that I have already started, and I'm just going to experiment with the watercolor paint. I have some cheap watercolor. You can purchase it anywhere like Walmart, the Dollar Tree, dollar store. This is affordable. It was about $1. So if you have watercolor, great. But if you don't have it, you can purchase it in those places. You can also go to craft stores and get more expensive watercolor. I have some more expensive watercolor from a tube, but if you are beginning, I would advise you to not spend out a lot of money on watercolor paint. I would just use a simple palette like this. You can also use watercolor pencils or washable markers if you want to experiment with that. But I'm going to show you in this video how to use this watercolor and show you some different watercolor techniques. Whenever you paint the blossoms, you're going to have to practice with tones. You're going to need some water. You're going to, of course, need your paint. You're going to need some different size brushes. If you don't have a lot of brushes to choose from, you can, we'll make do with you can make do with what you have. There are no rules here, but of course, I'm an artist. I have plenty of brushes. And it's okay if you don't have a lot of brushes. I will pretty much be using some of my smaller, skinnier brushes to start out with. So I'm going to start with a brush like this, okay? And I'm going to practice some tones over here because you want to know how your paint's going to look before you paint your image. And I'm just going to show you some techniques on how to control your paint. I first want to test and see if my brush is clean, okay? So I can test that onto the paper towel. And then I can test it onto my paper, and I'm just going to paint some water on. Now, what I'm going to do is use a technique called diluting. And whenever you dilute your paint, that means that you add more water than paint. And I'm going to pull this red color, okay, into the water. And I'm just going to wash that around and just kind of explore and see what kind of tones I can create, or values I can create. And here I've created something like a value scale. I've just practiced my different tones. I've gone from lighter to darker. And whenever you do this technique, if you accidentally put too much water or color, you can take your paper towel and you can pull it, okay? And it pretty much cleans off your paper. All right, so if you do make a mistake, you can dab on a little water and take your paper towel. If you've painted concentrated paint where there's more paint than water, it'll be harder to do that. But you can work the water in there and still pull some of the tone out, so it won't be so dark. So this painting here, or this practice thumbnail sketch, I have use my finger. For beginners, sometimes it's good to use objects or things that you can trace. And since my hand is always available, I can use my hand for measuring. I can also use like my fingers for curves. I'm going to place my finger like this and go around in a radial pattern and apply the curve. So I'm going to just go to the side of this one that I've already painted. And I'm going to of course, practice my tones. And I don't want my paint to be too dark, but I want it to be visible. So I'm just going to practice and test and see what tones I can make. This is a nice tone to sketch. I am sketching on some color. Maybe it's not a nice tone. It needs to be a little darker. Okay, I am just creating a curve. Okay, for the size paper that I'm going to be using today, this size blossom will be just fine. Okay, so I'm going to take my finger away and I'm going to see what space I have, but I'm going to put my finger back to show you the length of the petal, or how you can use your finger to gauge the length of your petal. You see the fold of the segment of the pointer finger here. I have a fold in my finger, and that's probably about the length that I want it to be. So I'm gonna go from the center and go down and make a dot, okay? And then that is going to help guide me with the rest of the petal. So I'm gonna turn my paper and I'm just gonna place this, okay, it's gonna line up just so, and I'm going to paint another curve. And then I'm gonna go around and I'm gonna paint another curve and go around and paint another curve, and then go around and paint another curve. Okay, and if you look at these flowers, they go in different directions. If it just so happens that your fingers don't, or your curves don't line up just exactly perfect, it's okay. Because the imperfections actually will make it look more natural. Okay, so I am going to paint on some water and dilute that paint that I've already painted, because I'm going to go back to the image. If you look at the actual petals, they're a very, very light, delicate baby blush pink. Okay, and then they fade into the darker color. Now, whenever you look at them from afar, all that darker pink kind of blends together, and the trees look pretty bold pink, okay? But if you look at the petals up close, they're a nice blush of pink, and it blends into the darker pink, okay? So for that technique, what I'm gonna do is wash on my color, or I'm going to wash on some water, and then the outline will kind of blend away into the flower, creating a more blended shape. Okay. And then I'm going to come in and maybe just kind of delicately outline where my petals go. So that curve meets the other curve, but right there where the curves meet, I'm just going to paint on, I'm going to test my color. I'm going to paint on the edge of the petal, and I'm just going to delicately line on, maybe going from the center out, and line in the direction to where those curves meet. Okay, and blend that out. That doesn't have to be that doesn't need to be a dark line. It's just a light faded line, just indicating where the petals are. Okay, now I'm going to do a technique. I'm going to drop kind of like a water drop, and my kind of spread around some water, okay, and it already has a little bit of watercolor wash in it, but I'm going to get some more concentrated paint in my brush, okay, and I'm just going to tap into that droplet of water from the center, and that's going to make some natural looking variations of color. Okay, it's the different tones of the pink kind of fading in and out. Okay, and I'm gonna let that set. And I might pull it up into the flower, but I'm not gonna let it go into the full petal. Okay, and I'm just gonna let that set and rest into that petal or the flower, and then I'm going to move on to the next one, and I would just do a series of these. If you feel like you've gotten too much, you can pull the paint and kind of blot on the paper towel, okay, if you want to do that. And then if you feel like you blotted too much, you can come in and just tap in. Now your paper will dry out, okay, so you may want to apply more water. I'm just going to tap in some different touches of pink in the center. Okay, so this is the practice portion of our lesson. We're now going to move on to the next step, which is the branches, and then we're going to come back to this technique, and I will come back to this thumbnail sketch when we apply the actual blossoms to the branch. But I'm first going to show you how to create the branch.